Hello and welcome to First Solar's webinar series on the latest developments in solar and renewable energy. Today we are featuring PlantPredict, a sophisticated solar energy model that is designed to develop energy estimates for utility scale PV applications. I'm your host, Steve Crum, Director of Communications for First Solar. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen, you should see several little buttons or widgets, and I'd like to describe and highlight a few of those for you. The first and second widgets give you access to the slides and audio for today's webinar. You can adjust the sizing of the slides and audio levels as needed. After the formal presentation is complete, we're going to have a live Q&A session. If you'd like to submit questions throughout the session, click on the Q&A icon at any time. We'll be addressing as many questions as possible, and if we aren't able to get to every question, we'll respond directly at the close of the webinar. We also want this live event to be as interactive as possible, so we'll be pushing out some real-time polls throughout the webinar. We encourage your participation. There's also a helpful resources widget which provides all sorts of supplemental information for today's discussion, including a link to the PlantPredict contact form where you can request a PlantPredict login. Live tweeting and LinkedIn postings are encouraged. The hashtag for today's live webinar is #PlantPredict. You will receive email notification when the webinar is available on demand. And lastly, if you have any technical questions, click on the Help button and you will get immediate service. And now I'd like to introduce Lauren On, Product Manager for PlantPredict. She's going to lead us through a demonstration of the platform. Hello, Lauren. Thanks for sharing this with us today.
Hi, Steve. And thanks, everyone, for joining the webinar. I'm excited to give you guys a little more information about PlantPredict today. Before we get into the slides and the agenda, I wanted to kick us off with an icebreaker poll question. So popping up on your screen, you should see my question along with some multiple choice answers. I'm wondering what software you typically use for running energy predictions. Those of you who do run energy predictions are probably familiar with the options. We have SAM, which is available from NREL, PlantPredict, which is, of course, the topic of this webinar, Helioscope from Folsom Labs, the well-known PVSys, and then there are a few other smaller options. So go ahead and answer other if you're using something else, as well as I don't run energy predictions if you're not running them actively. So while you guys are answering, I'll give you a second to make your selection. Just a level set on the agenda for today. I have just a couple slides to go through to help you get acquainted with what PlantPredict is, a little bit of its history, and then I do want to spend the lion's share of our time doing a demo so that you can experience firsthand some of the benefits of PlantPredict. I'm hoping you'll walk out of this webinar knowing what PlantPredict is and being able to run a very simple energy prediction yourself. Okay, it looks like we've got a good number of responses to the poll, so let's go ahead and take a look at those results together. It looks like many of you are using PVSys, which I'm not surprised to hear. That's by far the most common software that's used on the market today. And then we have a handful of people using some of the other options. I'm very happy to see that 11% of you are using PlantPredict. That's awesome. And then some people that don't run energy predictions. So for those of you that are running energy predictions in some of the other software on the market, I hope you'll walk out of this webinar understanding how PlantPredict might be able to help you get quicker utility scale PV energy predictions. And then for those of you that aren't running energy predictions, you guys are also very welcome here, and I think you'll get a lot out of today's webinar. PlantPredict is designed for very novice users as well as very advanced users. So I'm hoping that you might walk out if you're feeling comfortable running an energy prediction yourself. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and transition just to a little bit of information about PlantPredict. What is PlantPredict? I'm hoping most of you read the webinar invite that you signed up for, and so you should already have an idea of what PlantPredict is. At its core, it's software that's been designed for utility-scale PV energy models. We embarked on the journey of making PlantPredict available to the market because we recognized a need. And that need was the utility scale market has really exploded over the last 10 years, with the amount of PV installed going from very small capacity to a very large capacity. But what we saw is that the software available to that market really did not mature in the same way. And so in the last couple of years, we've seen people who are using relatively arduous and outdated processes to get energy predictions when they didn't need to be doing that. So we're trying to solve that problem for them by offering a modern software that will yield faster energy predictions. We have an awesome team that backs up the software of solar performance experts, software developers, and then user experience experts as well as far as software goes. And between those three teams, we've put together PlantPredict as you'll see it today. We think it's bankable. We believe it's fully bankable, can be used for contracting. And the reason we're comfortable saying that is threefold. We've benchmarked PlantPredict against more than 1 gigawatt of utility scale power plants and found that it does a really good job of estimating the amount of energy that comes. We also didn't reinvent the wheel when it comes to algorithms. So we recognize that there are the algorithms that govern how much energy is going to come out of a power plant largely have been around for decades. And there's no reason to reinvent, for example, how the sun moves in the sky. That's something that we just didn't need to rederive. And so we've really relied on those tried and true algorithms that have been in the industry for decades and wrapped them in a new, modern, faster process in PlantPredict. And then finally, we recognize the need for independent review. So we've hired 4 of the largest independent engineering firms in the industry to review PlantPredict, to opine on what they think of it, and to write pretty comprehensive reports on it, which we've made available to all of our users in the Resource Center. And I'll be happy to show you guys those during the demo. So I mentioned PlantPredict's main value is that it really speeds up the process to getting an energy prediction. How did we do that? Well, one of the things we saw in other processes or previous processes is that people were running other pieces of software multiple times for large power plants. And they were taking those multiple runs, compiling them into a single Excel sheet that they made themselves, and calling that their energy prediction. That has a couple of different issues. First of all, it's very arduous and a long process, and in many cases it can take days to finish that energy prediction. Secondly, it's really prone to human error. So when you have someone who has to run something 10 times and type in 20 different values, there's a lot of places that someone can make a mistake. You don't have to do that in PlantPredict. So we've designed everything from the point where you choose your weather file, figure out how much sun is actually hitting your panels, to the high voltage transformers, the transmission lines, the LGIA limits at the end of the power plant. It's all included in PlantPredict. So there's no need for pre or post processing in Excel. Secondly, and I'm really excited about this one in particular, we've partnered with weather vendors. So it used to be that people would have to go to a weather data provider's piece of software, download a file, import it into their energy prediction software before they could actually complete their energy prediction. We've gotten connections to major weather vendor APIs straight into PlantPredict. So all you have to do is type in your latitude and longitude and click download, and you'll have your weather data straight into PlantPredict without having to switch back and forth between multiple software applications. And then finally, I'll just touch on the fact that it's cloud hosted. So what that means is that multiple people can work on the same energy prediction at the same time. If you're working with a colleague on a project and they want to go make a few tweaks to the energy prediction that you've created, rather than having to download all of the components, email them over, or post them on a shared location, you can both go into the software at the same time and see that prediction and work together collaboratively on it. And that really speeds up the process as well. So I could probably go on for an hour just listing things out, but I think our time is better spent getting into the software and seeing firsthand what some of these features are like. Let me switch over to the PlantPredict application. And actually, before I do that, I have one more poll question for you, just to help me target my demo. So what feature are you most excited to explore during this webinar? We have the basics of running an energy prediction, weather file direct download, which I just touched on, the simple layout feature, or comparing energy predictions, weather files, and charting. So go ahead and respond to that, and while you do that, I'm going to get set up for the demo. All right, we're all set. Let's take a look at the results quickly together. Looks like it's a pretty even split, but many of you are excited to see how you can compare energy predictions. That's something I was already planning on touching on, but I'll make sure to spend a little extra time on that. So coming up on the screen, you guys should be able to see a web browser that's been navigated to PlantPredict.com. This is a public web page that any of you can navigate to right now. You don't need to log in to get here. Just a couple things that are worth noting on this screen. We don't believe in black boxes at PlantPredict. So we believe that the user should be empowered to know what the software is doing on the back end with the numbers that they've put in. And because of that, we've made our models and algorithms available not just to our users, but also to the public. So if you're interested to know about the version of the Reindl diffuse decomposition model that we're using, for example, we've got quite a bit of information there. It's a little bit boring, but some of you might be interested to read it. It's all there for you to check out. We also have a pretty comprehensive user manual and then release notes. So one of the things that's really exciting about PlantPredict is that we work on a 2-week agile sprint process. And what that means is that we're able to release new features and bug fixes every 2 weeks, and you're able to see what it is that we've released just in the last couple months within the main PlantPredict website. This allows us to really quickly respond to user requests. So we have a support queue. It's support@plantpredict.com. We accept emails from anyone, actually, user or not, with things that you'd like to see. And we're able to plan every 2 weeks and really get those into the software as quickly as possible. And then finally, it's worth mentioning the Contact Us form. So we are currently offering complimentary licenses. If that's something any of the listeners today are interested in getting, go ahead and fill out this form and submit it, and we should have an account over to you in the next 48 hours. All right, without further ado, let's log into PlantPredict. So it takes just a second to authenticate here. And once I get in, everything that you need to do is located on the left navigation screen. So everything from if you're an account administrator, managing accounts, up to figuring out what weather files are available. At its core, PlantPredict is built on a number of libraries. So the weather library, for example, contains thousands of free weather files that our users can access. Inverters and module libraries as well. I'll go ahead and show you guys the inverter library. So it includes a range of inverter manufacturer, the equivalent of a PVSys OND file. We call them inverter files. And to be honest, they're a little boring if you click on them. It's just a lot of numbers. But this, at its core, is what's needed to run an energy prediction to estimate the performance of that inverter, so it's totally necessary. Has the efficiency curve. We do temperature and elevation derate. You can see this particular inverter doesn't have that information, but it's available for some other manufacturers. And then really quickly before we dive into a prediction, it's worth mentioning the Resource Center. So I told you guys we had 4 independent engineers review the application. Their reports are posted here for any of our users to read. And then this accuracy of energy assessments PDF is the results of the benchmarking work on over 1 gigawatt of operating facilities. It was presented at the IEEE Photovoltaic Specialist Conference a couple of years ago. So those resources are there for you guys. We also have a prediction queue, so you can see I've run quite a few predictions recently, and this is where I would navigate to see the results of some of those. If you're new to the software and you're not really sure where to start, the place to start is the project library. This is where you define where your project is located. And a project at its core is just a physical location on a map. So you can see I have a number of projects that I've put together that are listed here. If I clear this My Projects filter, you can also see that the list, you'll have to take my word for it, the list grew. And other people within my company have built projects as well. Probably a more exciting way to view this information is on the map. So you can see each blue pin in and of itself is a project. And if I click on it, it gives me a little bit of information about that project and who made it. So this looks like I made it since I am the demo user. If there wasn't already a project for the location that I was modeling, I would want to click Create a New Project. And there are a couple ways that you can go about doing this. You can click on the map, and it'll drop a pin for you. And then you can very quickly kind of drag it around if you didn't get quite the right location. Or you can type into a Google search box where you want your project to be located. And what it does is it drops a pin in the center of that location. And then if I said, no, I think I really wanted it here, it'll update the latitude and longitude for you. You can give your project a name. I'm going to call it August 15th Demo, and then click Save. So now you've defined where you're building your solar system. This is the prediction library, and normally, if this wasn't a brand new project, it would have a bunch of predictions listed under here that people had already built. I'm actually going to go ahead and navigate to an existing project so you guys can see what that looks like. So if I go to my East Texas demo, you can see there's a lot more information than there was a second ago, and that's because people have been actively building predictions under here. One thing that's worth mentioning is that there are these different colored flags. And what these denote are different permission levels. So when you make a new energy prediction, it starts as draft private. And what that means is that only you can see it. None of your colleagues can see it, and it's editable. If you wanted to work on something with someone else, you would just click Change Status, change it to draft share, confirm that change. And what that means is that now other people within your company can work on that prediction with you. So those are the two editable statuses. There are a number of read-only statuses. So we have bid, contract, development. And what these mean is that no one is going to be able to change these going forward. The results are locked in. And that's useful because if you generate an energy prediction, you send it to a client, you don't really want someone to go in and change the settings and rerun it. Same thing with contract. If you sign a contract on an energy prediction, that's going to be something that's around for a long time. And so you don't want someone to mess with it. The contract specifically is pinned to the top of the list because it's so important and because we want everyone in the company to be able to access it. You can very quickly view some summary statistics about the results of the energy prediction. And then I'll come back and show you guys comparisons later. Let's start a new prediction. So if I click Start a Prediction, I very quickly give it a name. Let's call this the August 15th Demo Prediction. It's free-form text, so you can call it whatever you'd like. And then there are 4 steps to getting all the information you need in. You can do these steps in any order you want. If you are particularly OCD and want to start from the top of the list and work down, that's great. If you want to start in the middle, that's awesome too. I'm going to start at the top of the list. So environmental conditions, the first step is to pick your weather file. I mentioned earlier that we have some pre-populated weather files in the system, and I can very quickly click on them and review them, see how far they are from my project. Looks like there are a lot that are already in my project location. If I decided I didn't see what I wanted here, I can click this Add New Weather File at the top right corner of the screen. And what it does is it gives me a list of weather data providers that I can download straight into the application. This is the part where, rather than having to navigate to another software application, PlantPredict is making it really easy for you. So we have Solar GIS, MediaNorm, Clean Power Research, and then a couple lesser known, but these are free weather data sources, NSRDB. So I'm going to choose MediaNorm and go ahead and download it. And what it's doing at this point is reaching out to the MediaNorm API for you. It's collecting that data and putting it into the PlantPredict database. It takes just a second because it is calling an external website, but you can see that it was pretty quick, and it has some summary statistics here for you. 1650 kilowatt hours per meter squared on the GHI. And then probably my favorite part of this is the charting. So you can very quickly look at the GHI, look at the clear sky model, make sure that the data is not shifted, that the results look reasonable, and this does look good. You can also tabulate your results. So if you wanted to email out monthly GHI to someone, you can just very quickly copy and paste this out. Assuming you're happy with the weather you selected, you would set weather as selected, and then it leads you into just a few other environmental conditions that you would need to fill in. I mentioned earlier that we tried to design this for a range of user types. So if you're a really novice user, we've actually defaulted almost everything for you, and you wouldn't have to click anything else at this point. If you're an expert user, if you run energy predictions day in, day out, you might know that the soiling loss in this location isn't 2%, it's 1%, for example. And so you can go ahead and either use the annual override to type that in. You can also put in different values for each month if you want. And then there's plant design temperatures. If you have a big mountain range next to your system, you can put that information here. I'm good with this for this prediction, so I'm going to go ahead and save my section. The next step is to build the power plant. So this is actually the nuts and bolts, the modules, the inverters, the cabling within my power plant. And there are two ways you can build. If you don't have a layout, and you don't know what you're going to build, you just know you have a plot of land, you would want to build on the map. If you do have a layout and you know exactly how many modules, exactly what type of modules, and how many inverters you would want to build block by block. I found that for our users, it's split between the two, but I think building on the map is more exciting to start, so I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to lead us into the block by block builder. So if I click on the map builder, you'll see on the left-hand side it has just a few basic settings that it needs from the user, and on the right is a map. So I'm going to start on the left and add my inverter. So I mentioned earlier we have a pre-populated inverter library that has a range of inverter types. You can also make your own inverter in PlantPredict if you didn't see what you wanted in here. And then I'm going to add my module. We have also a range of module types. I'm going to choose a First Solar Series 6 module for this prediction. You can put in, if you had a maximum DC capacity that you wanted it to model for you on this map, you can put that in here. Your GCR, which is of course related to row spacing, and so it automatically calculates the row spacing for you when you put your GCR in. And then the next step is to fill out the map. So if I click this polygon, and then I'm going to zoom out so you guys can see a little bit better what I'm doing here. I found a lot of people like to build on the satellite view rather than the map view, but we have both available. And if I knew that my plot of land spanned this road here and went up just a little ways, you guys might see a little bit of a delay because of the webinar, but just know when you're doing this in real time, it is really quick, and that delay is just a figment of the webinar we're working in right now. So I've defined my plot of land. I'm going to go ahead and populate it with modules and inverters. And so what it's doing is it's estimating how many tables of modules will fit in that area of land given the information you gave it on the left-hand side. You could also upload a KMZ if you had a KMZ boundary that you wanted to use rather than drawing it. This is telling me we can fit about 60 megawatts DC and about 51 AC. And this looks good to me. So I'm going to save my progress because I wouldn't want to lose any of that. And then remember at the beginning of this, I told you guys we could build on the map or we could build in the block builder. What's nice about building on the map is it allows you to then switch to the block builder and actually see the nuts and bolts of your power plant. It is right now a one-directional process, so once you go that way, you can't go back to the map. But we are in future releases planning on making it two-directional. So this is the block builder. If I just look at the tree view here, PlantPredict power plants are built on a block, array, inverter, and DC fields architecture basis. If I start at the block, there's not much to it. This is really a collection of medium voltage transformers. If you had a construction date or an energization date that you knew this block was going to be energized, you could put that here, but really not a lot of information on the block screen. The array is a collection of inverters that exist behind a single medium voltage transformer. And so you can see there are transformer stacks here. All of this is filled in for you because we started in the map builder. If you knew that you wanted your no load loss to be something other than 0.2, you could change some of these settings. An inverter, I think most of you know what an inverter is. It takes the DC energy and converts it to AC, and it contains a number of modules behind it. So if you wanted to switch out the SMA inverter you originally chose, you could do that here. And then finally, the DC field is where most of the meat of the power plant exists. So this is where things like, are you building a fixed tilt or a tracker? What tilt angle is your fixed tilt at? That's all included here. You can see we have a nice 3D visualization of what you're building, which helps kind of bring to life all of the static or the text inputs that you've put in. And then more recently, we've supported sloped terrain. So if you're building on a slightly graded land, that is something we're able to model in PlantPredict. We have a number of advanced settings that we intentionally hid so that the novice user or the everyday user doesn't have to deal with looking at all of these conductive and convective coefficients that most people don't change, but they're available for the energy prediction experts who really want to get in there and know better than the software. So I'm happy with my power plant. I am going to go ahead and work on my system section. So this is where if you have between your power plant and the energy meter an HV transformer, a high voltage transformer, or a transmission line that's meaningful, this is where you would put that in. So you can see you can do those in whatever order you want. Say I had a transformer first that was stepping up to 34.5 kV. This is where I would put that in. And then if I had a transmission line that was 1 kilometer long, I could put that in here. And you can do up to 6 of these in any order that you want. We find it's pretty rare that people want to make 6 of these, but far be it for us to limit you. So then you can also put in an availability loss. We typically use 1%, but there is a range of inputs that are available. So I'm happy with my system. The last step before we'll get to run our energy prediction is model choices. And again, we've defaulted everything to industry standard practices here, but users can come in and choose from a range of diffuse decomposition models. I mentioned the Reindl earlier. We also offer the Dirant and the herbs. We have Hay and Perez transposition models that many of you are probably familiar with. This is where you would basically define the prediction algorithm settings for your energy prediction. One thing that's really awesome about PlantPredict that you can't do in a lot of other software is you could run a 25-year energy prediction in a single button click rather than having to run each year separately. That would take probably 3 minutes to run, and I don't want to make you guys wait, so I'm going to do 1 year, but just know the options available. So I'm happy with my simulation settings. This all looks good to me. I'm going to save and close, and we're ready to run. So I'm going to run the prediction. Typically it takes less than 10 seconds, but it'll just be a minute.
Lauren, let me jump in here. I know First Solar's technology is based on thin film modules. Does PlantPredict work the same way, take into all these same considerations for crystalline silicon PV?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, Steve. So PlantPredict is built on the one diode model, which is the same back-end model for PV modules that's used in PVsyst. And that works for both crystalline silicon and CadTel modules, as well as SIGs, amorphous silicon, some of the older technologies that are not used as often. So short answer to your question is yes, you can absolutely use this for crystalline silicon modules as well. So let's go ahead and look at the on-screen results for this prediction. So you can see I expect about 93 gigawatt hours of energy and a performance ratio of about 85%. So both of those look good to me within reasonableness. And then loss factors. So this is one of my favorite sections where you can really see how much loss you expect due to temperature, how much gain from tilting the modules towards the sun. You can very quickly diagnose any issues with your energy prediction from this view. So a lot of other information available on screen. And then just quickly, I will note that you can export a number of different files. So we have a plant summary PDF, which is really useful if you're bidding on a project and you just want a quick summary of basically what's on the screen here. And we also have an Excel 8760, which is great for project finance models. We have inputs and assumptions, which is good if you're contracting. It has basically every single knob in PlantPredict and what it was set to. And then a few more detailed options that I think are useful only for the super nerds out there that want every single data point that PlantPredict calculated. Some of these, the detailed export options would be for them. So I'm going to generate a plant summary PDF so you guys can see what it looks like. It's going to ask me to change this to a read-only state. And the reason for that is what I mentioned earlier. If you're sending this out to a client, you really don't want someone to go in here and change the prediction later. So I'm going to change it to a bid state. And it's going to just quickly download the PDF for me while it's changing the state. If I open that up and give you guys a view of what it looks like, you can see it has information about my project location, my plant characteristics. It has those loss factors I mentioned earlier, as well as some of the first-year results. So this would be a great sheet you could send out to a client if you were bidding on a project. A couple other things that are useful in the on-screen results. One of my favorite new features that we've added is this charting functionality. So for the 11% of you that are already running PlantPredict, you might not have discovered this yet. We've released it in the last month or two. But basically, you can very quickly go through and visualize your plant energy on an hourly basis, a monthly basis, and you can also tabulate the results. So it allows the user the ability to do some post-processing on their results without having to export them. We have things like performance ratio, plane of array insulation, as well as a couple other variables. And then finally, the 12 by 24, which is admittedly a pretty boring chart to look at on the screen, but it's very useful to a lot of end users of prediction. So we have the ability to very quickly copy that to the clipboard. You could paste it into your Excel sheet that you were using for the project planning. Okay, so that's the nuts and the bolts of running an energy prediction. I wasn't timing us exactly, but if I had to guess, we made that prediction in 15 minutes or less, with a lot of dialogue for me. So many of our users are able to generate a prediction in under 5 minutes. A lot of you said you were excited to see how to compare predictions, and so I want to make sure to touch on that. If I come back to the prediction dashboard within my East Texas project, I have, let's see, almost 10 predictions here. If I knew that I wanted to compare the top 3, I'm going to go ahead and select those. And now that I've selected them, I'm going to click Ready to Compare. What that's going to do is put together a table of values on screen so that I can quickly kind of scan through and check out, okay, it looks like the AC size for these projects or for these predictions was changing. I can look at the first year results here about halfway down the screen, which is what most people want to do, and check out the specific yields that they generated. And then, of course, I can export that into an Excel sheet so that I can do some analysis on the results, which is what most of our users do. The Onscreen is really for a cursory review, and then the Excel is really for some more detailed analysis. If I decided that prediction 2 that I had chosen was not relevant anymore, I can quickly hide that by clicking on it here. And you can see prediction 1 and 3 just next to each other. So there's the ability to quickly pivot on what you're predicting or comparing as well. You can compare up to 6 predictions in any screen. And then this is probably a nice segue into weather comparison. So if I go to the weather library and I click Compare Item, it's going to give me the same sort of interface where I can select up to 6 weather files. I'm going to choose 3 just for the purpose of this comparison and click Ready to Compare. And it's basically the same screen that pops up with one additional feature that's worth mentioning, which is a charting functionality, where you can look at the clear sky model, GHI, for the 3 files side by side. Looks like I actually chose 3 of the exact same files for this comparison, so you can't see the difference, but take my word for it, if you had 3 different weather files, you would see 3 different lines here for GHI. I can do the same thing where I can quickly hide weather file 2 if I wanted to. But this is a really handy feature. If you're not sure what weather file you want to use for a prediction and you want to see how the GHI compares, how the solar resource compares between those weather files, this is an awesome feature to help you make that decision very quickly. So if I exit that comparison, just one more thing that's worth mentioning, I'm going to go back to my demo project and back to the prediction that we just made, which was the August 15th demo prediction. There's this feature called Quick Edit, and the engineers that use PlantPredict love Quick Edit because it allows them to very quickly make changes to that. What it is it's a table of all of the relevant inputs, and you are able to override them. Now, the one caveat is that I chose a read-only prediction. And I told you guys earlier, you can't change the inputs to a read-only prediction. So the software is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing here, which is not allowing me to use this feature. If I go to a non-read-only prediction, which is like this prediction estimate 50, which is draft shared, go into the quick edit, you'll see I have the ability to say, oh, I didn't want the tilt angle to be 25 here. I wanted it to be 20 for that one block. I can also update all of them. So if I knew that I wanted my mismatch loss to be 1.5, I can override all of the blocks, all of the arrays at the same time. And that's really a time-saving feature because I know when people are developing projects, they very quickly decide they want to make a change to something. And this allows you to quickly go in and change the prediction. And then one last thing that's worth mentioning, a lot of people ask me, well, I set up a fixed tilt prediction. Now I want to run the same thing, but I want to run a tracker. What's the fastest way to do that? And I would say using the clone feature is probably the fastest way. What that does is it essentially makes a copy of the prediction. You can go in and very quickly change the name, and then you can go in and edit the power plant as you see fit. You can also, if you wanted to, rather than running a tracker, you could go in and change from Perez to Hay. So the clone feature allows you to very quickly make a copy of the prediction and edit it so that you can compare the results. So with that, that's the end of my demo. I'm hoping that you guys have got enough information that you can walk away and we'll get you a login to PlantPredict, and you should be able to run a very basic energy prediction. Do we have any questions and answers coming in, Steve?
We do. This is a quick reminder that as we start going through the questions, you can use the Q&A icon for the Q&A widget at the bottom of your console. And we're trying right now is that we've got a lot of nice things coming in. We're grouping them to prioritize and group similar questions together. So I don't know if you want to just go right to questions or if you want to keep running the demonstration prediction and see what you've got for any results. We've got all sorts of questions lined up.
Yeah, I think this is a good place to take questions. If we can take some of the first ones that have come in.
Mm-hmm. We have the first question is, can you do long-term and nonlinear degradation?
Yes, you absolutely can. So I showed you guys earlier where you could set up, I'll navigate there now. You could set up a 25-year prediction. So we have a number of different model types available. We've got linear AC degradation, linear DC, as well as the lesser used stepped AC and nonlinear DC. So under the simulation settings is where you would choose that.
Thanks for that. Here's another one. How frequently do you update the module inverter database? What do I do if I get a proprietary inverter or module file that I don't want anyone else to see?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think I skipped over that during the demo. So we do our best to keep the module and inverter databases up to date, but we're never going to be able to meet everyone's needs. There's always a new flavor of an inverter that someone wants to model. And so what we do is we allow users to make their own inverters. So if you go to the inverter database and you click Create Inverter in the top right corner of the screen, you can see that you can very quickly type in all of the inputs that you would need. There's also an import from PVSys option where you can copy from an OND file, paste the text into here, and it'll make it for you. As far as modules go, let me just show you that one as well. Upper right-hand corner again in the module database, if I click Create Module, there's the same thing where you can manually fill out all of this information, or you can click Import from PVSys and copy and paste the text from a PAN file. So basically this allows users to have full control over what modules and inverters they're using. Great question.
Lauren, I think you touched on this one, but maybe you could say a bit more about it. There were a couple of questions about access to an API and how that is used by people that have more advanced skills or interest in getting through the API.
Sure, absolutely. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what an API is, it's basically the ability to connect programmatically to the back end of PlantPredict. I mentioned we are using our weather data providers' APIs when we're downloading from them. So we're connecting to their API products. PlantPredict definitely does have an API that we allow our users to connect to. It's obviously a very technical product where you would need a software developer or someone who has a good technical skill set to connect to it. And it requires a little bit of setup, obviously, as you're having to program to connect to it. So if anyone is interested in that, that's the type of thing where you would want to reach out to the PlantPredict team. We can get you set up with a starter kit, have a few conversations, and go from there. But yes, it's absolutely available.
Thanks for that. I think you talked about this right at the beginning of the demonstration when you were talking about PlantPredict being bankable. There were several questions here about why is that really important, and what does that literally mean for people, for example, IEs that want to understand how accurate and bankable PlantPredict really is. Can you say just a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah, that's a little bit of a loaded question and a good question. To me, and I think a lot of people in the industry have different opinions on what bankability means, but to me, what it means is that you can rely on the software to provide an accurate output, and that it will do a good job of modeling the energy that's coming out of the plant. So we believe it's bankable because we've compared PlantPredict to over 1 gigawatt of operating facilities. Just a little bit more of a note on that. In that study, there were 20 power plants that had operated anywhere up to 5 years. So we took the measured energy from their energy meters, compared it to PlantPredict with measured weather input, and found that on average, they were within 0.1% of the PlantPredict output. And I think the standard deviation on that for the engineers on the call was about 1.9%. So it was a very good result, and something that I haven't seen done for other software on the market. I haven't seen studies of that magnitude done to evaluate their accuracy. I also mentioned the fact that we believe it's bankable because at its core, it's really not using models that aren't available to the industry already in other software applications. And so for those two reasons, primarily, First Solar is comfortable contracting on PlantPredict, and we've contracted several hundred megawatts on it already.
Thanks for that. Can PlantPredict do statistical analysis, for example, of P50, P90, P99 or such?
It can. Let me show you guys where that is. So if I navigate to my demo project, oops, wrong project there, and I go into one of these draft shared predictions under model choices, it is an advanced feature, so we've hidden it, but if I unclick the uncertainty analysis, it'll expand this graph. And assuming you have good inputs for what you expect the uncertainty of your weather data and your model to be, for example, you can go ahead and type those in here, and it'll give you just a quick visual of what the P90, what the P99 means. And it will also output the results with your energy prediction for the selections that you choose. If you wanted something special like a P83, which is random, but I'm sure that someone's requested it before, you can go ahead and set a custom p-value here. So that's how you would generate an uncertainty analysis.
Thanks for that. We have a few more questions coming in, and a reminder, if anyone's got a question, to please submit it through the Q&A panel. Before we go into the last couple of those, is there anything else you wanted to highlight from the demonstration that you loaded, or you want to continue with questions? It's up to you. You've got the helm for the demo here.
Yeah, let's keep going with the questions. I want to make sure that we get as many of those answered live as possible.
Great, thank you. Can you explain the plant design temperature in more detail? Which of the temperature values is used in the design?
Sure, yeah, I'm definitely not an expert at this, but let's just take a look at where those plant design temperatures are listed. So you can see we've got, basically what we're doing is looking up the nearest ASHRAE station and pulling that data automatically from the ASHRAE database. And so this is important when you're sizing your inverters as far as the kVA rating goes. And it'll use these temperatures, specifically the 99.6 cooling temperature, to decide what the best kVA rating for that location is.
Here's one that's related to the question I asked earlier in the webcast about thin film versus crystalline. And the question is essentially, how are we capturing CAD-TEL thin film performance better than PV-SYST is doing?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So When it comes to modeling CAD/TEL modules, the spectral content of the atmosphere becomes more important. What that means is that the light, so your pyranometer, say, is reading 1,000 watts per meter squared, that's not the same thing in a very dry climate as it would be in a very humid climate. So in a really humid climate, more of that irradiance is going to be available to a CAD/TEL module, and so you're going to generate more energy from that module. So when it comes down to its core, PlantPredict is more accurate for all modules, not just for CAD/TEL. This happens for crystalline silicon as well, because it models spectral shift correctly, or spectral correction. And that's done in a couple places. You can put in monthly spectral values in the environmental conditions here. If I go to the simulation settings, you can see there are a number of different spectral models that have been reviewed by independent engineers and also published by the industry as a whole that are available in PlantPredict that are not currently available in PVSys. So when you're using PlantPredict in a really humid or very dry climate, you'll see a 3% gain or a 4% gain that wouldn't be captured in PVSys, and that's why PlantPredict is more accurate.
We had one question that was looking for a little bit more detail on how the model accounts for shading hills, mountains, and slopey installations. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to that section of the application just so we're all looking at the same thing. It's, of course, in the power plant builder and then the DC field. And so basically what it does is if you knew that you were building on roughly a 3% grade that was south facing, you would put in a slope of, a 3-degree grade that was south facing, you would put that in here. You can also put grade in terms of percent as well. And then what it's going to do, it's hard to see, I'm going to actually put in a kind of extreme slope here, because it's going to go ahead and slope your modules for you. So on the back end, what's happening is it's modeling the sun shining at these modules and how the shadow changes with the slope versus without the slope. And it's going to estimate the energy loss associated with that. You can also do more advanced architectures. So if you had a 10% slope, slightly east facing, you could put in a 220-degree azimuth, and it's going to break that up for you. Again, it might be a little hard to see over the webinar here, but it essentially tilts the tables not just in the south direction, but in the southeast direction.
Thanks. We've got a couple more here. This will be our second to last one. If you import a 1-minute time step weather file, can you run a 1-minute time step model?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. You absolutely can run sub-hourly time series in PlantPredict. We support all the way down to 1 minute, and you can run a good length of time using 1 minute. Of course, it takes longer because you're running more data, and you might have to wait a little longer, but it's absolutely something that we support.
That we can wrap up with before closing here is a number of people have asked, how much does PlantPredict cost? And I'm laughing because there's several inquiries right on this webcast. How do I sign up for it? And then the question of how much does it actually cost?
Yeah, I'm really glad someone asked that question. So we recognize that there might be some inertia in the industry to accept new software. And so in order to overcome that inertia, we're currently offering PlantPredict licenses free of charge so that people can experience firsthand the value that it can deliver to their company. The best way to get a license, and I think we'll be sending out some follow-up details after the webinar about this, but while I have everyone, if you go to plantpredict.com and you fill out the contact form with just your company name, a little bit of information about yourself, having your email address is really important, and just type in here, I'd like a PlantPredict license, please, and hit send. That will come to the PlantPredict team. We'll set you up with a complimentary license, and we'll wish you happy predicting from there.
Lauren, thank you very much, and thank you all for attending today's webinar. A link to the on-demand recording will be emailed to everybody shortly. You can follow First Solar on Twitter and LinkedIn to stay informed of upcoming webinars. In a few weeks, we're going to be hosting a webinar on our Series 6 PV module. At the close of this event, you will be prompted to complete a short survey. Your feedback is important to us, so please take a minute and let us know what you thought of today's content and what you'd be interested in learning about more in the future. Thanks again, and with that, this is Steve Crum from First Solar, and we'll see you next time.